This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome to our first show in the 2019 season of NC Spin. We're kicking the year off right, beginning with our panel to catch us up on what's happened in the 9th Congressional District election over the holidays. But we also have two outstanding experts to talk to us about economic and population trends of recent months, then forecast how they're going to impact our year just started. And I can't wait to hear our panel tell us something we don't know. Speaking of them, let's introduce you to this special panel. Michael Walden, who's the William Neal Reynolds Professor of Economics at NC State University and a good friend. Chris Fitzsimon, our senior political analyst. John Hood, syndicated columnist and author. And Rebecca Tippett, who is the Director of Demography at the UNC Population Center. Well, we'll begin our uninterrupted debate after these brief messages from our underwriters.
They're up before dawn and work late into the night. They believe in hard work, family, and doing the right thing. They stand up for their communities when others walk away. They're good people who just want a fair shake. They are farmers. At North Carolina Farm Bureau, we are proud to stand with our farmers.
Life's busy, but you're in control. As an electric cooperative member, you have access to lots of tools to help manage your home energy use and budget, so you can focus on what's most important.
From treating the newest member of your family to helping a loved one make end-of-life decisions, your family physician is with you every step, for every stage of life, for every member of your family. Despite a healthcare landscape fraught with potential landmines, family physicians across North Carolina are providing you a lifetime of committed, dependable medical care. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Let's get started. The outcome of the 9th Congressional District election gets stranger and stranger. A three-judge panel was recently obviously irked that the State Board of Elections delayed a hearing on possible voter fraud until January 11th, so they refused to grant another stay to the board. Last Friday, the board officially dissolved, and Governor Cooper attempted to appoint another board, but Republicans balked at the move. Now we don't know what's going on. Chris and John, I want to ask you, Mark Harris and the State Republican Party called for the board to certify Harris as the winner before they ceased to exist, but they didn't. Where do things stand now, Chris?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. I think North Carolina, one thing we know, North Carolina does not have anybody representing them in the 9th Congressional District. We do not have a board that can make that decision until after January 31st. Harris has filed a court challenge, so the courts are now involved. I think the most likely thing after all this dust clears is that we'll have a thorough investigation. We'll have a new primary, as the General Assembly insists, if we have a new election, and we'll have a new election. Interestingly, the former incumbent, Robert Pittenger, announced that he would not run again. I think there will be several Republican candidates run in the primary whenever it's held, most likely in the spring or the summer, and the Democrat McGready will run as well.
John, let me get back to a point that he made earlier. Harris wants the court to declare him the winner.
Not exactly, no.
Okay.
What he wants the court to do is to step in and require that his election be certified.
Okay.
The local election boards have certified, but the State Board of Elections did not certify. State Board of Elections doesn't currently exist. It will exist at the end of the month. This is a series of odd things.
How can this happen when there is no state board to certify?
This has happened before.
Has it?
That happened during a previous time. There was an interregnum between two different versions of the board, and a court did step in. That's the precedent that they're setting. The fundamental issue here has become not are there credible allegations. There are credible allegations of at least mishandling absentee ballots and a variety of other things. The issue has come down to, are there enough ballots that are implicated or possibly involved that could have either been tampered with or thrown away to change the outcome of an election? That is not required by the legal standard.
No.
On the other hand, it's hard to imagine a stopping point if you start throwing out elections where you have some questionable ballots but not enough to change the outcome. We have illegal ballot. We had illegal ballots cast in 2016, in 2014, in 2012. Not enough to change the outcome.
I understand there's some 1,300 ballots now under question from this process. Doesn't this have something to say about the integrity of our election process, Mike?
Well, it does, and economically it hurts our brand. We've heard a lot about North Carolina's brand and losing the three companies, Amazon, the Army, and Apple. So we need to get this cleared up because it's just not good for the state's image.
So I think that the real $64 question or $64,000 question or $64 million, whatever you want.
You let Mike adjust for inflation.
Yeah, that's right. When are we going to have a congressman in the 9th District, Chris?
Oh, I think it'll be, I don't think who knows what the court will decide, but I'll be surprised if it is the summer by the earliest.
Keep in mind that the state court could do what Mark Harris wants, and then Congress could still refuse to seat him. I mean, this is ultimately a decision the U.S. House of Representatives has. Even if Mark Harris's election is certified, they could say, no, we're not going to seat him.
Since none of us are lawyers, does anybody really think that's going to happen?
No, it's also interesting, though, to say, I mean, part of this, and they didn't know this was going to happen, obviously, but all the controversy about the State Board of Elections, which the General Assembly brought on itself and lost several court decisions, which is why we're in this mess of not having a State Board of Elections. 2 years ago, if this had happened, we'd have a seated State Board, and we probably would have already have had an investigation and maybe even a decision.
Yeah, so far as it goes. Rebecca, is this something that people are concerned about and worried about, or is it just us political pundits and people who follow this kind of stuff?
Well, I definitely think that all the election stuff, and when we're starting to think about it, it just gets me thinking about future issues that I'm concerned about, such as the 2020 census. And when we're looking at this, we're looking at kind of a sea of uncertainty around this specific election, but more broadly, uncertainty around redistricting, reapportionment, and what the general map is going to look like in just another 18 months or so.
Anybody want to go out on a limb and predict? We've heard people say Mark Harris is not going to win if it has to go through another primary election and a general election.
I think he would struggle. And it's important, particularly since Rebecca just brought this up, there will be a new set of districts for the legislature and I think for Congress for 2020, at which point those districts are done. Yeah. So we will, the currently seated member, whoever gets seated in the 9th District, will be running in 2020 if they run for re-election in yet another new district.
I tell you.
There should be a 14th one added to the map.
We didn't take a holiday from politics, I'll tell you that. So as we move into the new year, the first question a lot of people ask is, what's the economy going to be like in 2019? And we've asked one of the state's leading economists, Mike Walden, who we said earlier is the William Neal Reynolds Professor of Economics at NC State, to give us insights. Mike, first of all, we want you to polish up your crystal ball and tell us what's going to happen in 2019, but probably it'd be a good idea for you to focus on 2018 and tell us a little bit economically about where we ended up 2018.
Looks like 2018 is going to be a very good year, both nationally and here in North Carolina. 2.6 million jobs added nationally, around 100,000 jobs added here in North Carolina. The GDP, gross domestic product numbers, we only have those for half a year, but right now it looks like we may be trailing the nation in growth there, so not all good. But we saw, I think, a couple of big positives. One, middle income jobs had good growth in 2018, and rural counties actually led all regions in growth rates.
Help us understand that, because I read that from you, and I'm thinking, boy, that just runs counter to everything we're hearing.
Well, if you think about, I think what we've been hearing, of course, is the fact they have lagged for most of the 21st century, but I think this is I call it the benefits, I call it the elixir of growth, the fact that we've been growing very well over the last couple of years. Our urban areas are getting filled up, low unemployment, higher cost, and I think a lot of companies are taking a second look at some of our rural counties. Plus, we've had some good job announcements in rural counties.
So as the urban counties are increasingly employed, and it's hard finding people.
That's right, and also the urban counties, and of course we've seen rapid growth there, but you tend to get higher costs in terms of traffic congestion, for example, as well as higher housing costs. And at some point, people take those into account, and they might give those rural counties a second look.
Let's move into 2019. Boy, in the last week or so, we've seen a stock market that was like a yo-yo. I mean, it was up 600 points, it was down 600 points. How is that volatility going to affect us in North Carolina?
Well, I think it's going to affect us because we're tied into the national economy. If the national economy goes into recession, we'll go into recession. I think we're at that point in the business cycle. We've been growing now for almost 10 years.
Yeah.
We're at that point in the business cycle where a lot of people are thinking, gosh, things are going to have to slow down. We're going to have to see higher inflation. The Fed has been increasing interest rates. A lot of pushback on that, of course. But I still think 2019 is going to be a growth year. I think it'll be a slower growth year, but I don't see a recession in 2019. I think earliest will be 2020.
It's really interesting because a lot of the national economists are predicting a slowdown.
Yeah, slowdown. I'm on board with that. Slowdown means we're growing, but we're growing at a slower rate. Recession means we actually have negative growth. I'm not in that camp, and most economists are not yet.
I want to open this up to questions from John and Chris and Rebecca, but the one thing I think I'm particularly interested in is the ag economy. Tell me what you think is going to happen, because farmers are really hurting in North Carolina.
Well, we've got to get those trade deals. Now, we have the NAFTA deal, the new NAFTA settled, but it still has to be ratified by the three legislatures in three countries. That's not a done deal, especially in our country. We need to get the China deal done so we can start sending farm products there, soybeans, et cetera. I'm optimistic about the future for agribusiness in North Carolina. It's an $87 billion industry. Meat production is now our top product, and the world is eating more meat. I know there's controversy about that, so I think if we can solve those environmental issues related to meat production,
particularly pork,
we can see a nice upturn in agricultural production.
So let me make sure I've summarized what you're saying. Maybe a little bit of a slowdown for 2019 in the economy, but nothing dramatic.
Well, nothing dramatic, and definitely, in my mind, at this point, I might change it by 3 o'clock this
I was getting ready to say, you're on record now.
That's right.
We have you on tape.
Not a recession in 2019. And the next recession, I do think, will be mild, not like the Great Recession of 2007 to 09.
John, Chris, questions?
Well, I do have a question, Mike. Some years ago, you wrote about you've written many times, but in particular about the transition between the traditional triad from decades ago of textile and apparel and furniture and wood products and tobacco products towards at least something like a biggish five that had food, as you said, food processing and finance, technology, auto parts. What was the fifth
Technology.
one? Yeah. So is that still are we transitioning even away from that towards a broader set of economic clusters? How are those doing? Finance, auto parts, those kind of things.
Finance has consolidated some. Auto parts, I think we're optimistic about what auto parts will do in North Carolina because of the new NAFTA. And this is more managed trade than free trade, but there's going to be a requirement for more of those parts on vehicles assembled to be made in the U.S. I do think I mentioned agribusiness. I do think that pharmaceuticals, some consolidation there. So they all haven't been growing at the same pace, but I think enough of them have been growing that still is the new
People are often surprised that auto parts is a big part. We're a big part of the automotive industry. It's just we make parts that go into the plants that are in the next door states.
And Rebecca, Chris, any questions?
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, I know that we're talking a lot about job growth. What have you seen and what are your predictions for wage growth? Because I know that we've seen some...
We actually did a little bit better in terms of wage growth adjusted for inflation in North Carolina in 2018. I think that will improve in 2019. But I think we're in almost a new economic model here. I think this has been one of the things we've not seen in this upturn in the cycle where we get wage inflation that worries businesses. We're just not seeing that. And I think that's because of the globalized economy. It's still easier than it was in the past for businesses to offshore products and production, et cetera. So I think we'll get wage growth. It'll be very modest. The key there is to make workers more productive so businesses want to pay them.
Just one quick question. Tom mentioned the yo-yo stock market. Actually, it was the worst, I think, December we've had in decades. And over as a year, it was the worst since 2007, 2008. I think when people see those headlines and see a 600-point drop buzzing on their phones, half of Americans have stocks, mostly 401ks. What do you tell people as an economist when the stock market is suffering?
I say don't look at the headlines, because most people should not be traders. They should be long-run investors. If they're short-run investors, they shouldn't do it, quite frankly. And they should not look at those headlines. The stock market will come back, and we've already seen some good news the last couple of days.
The study of economics obviously contains lots of numbers and charts, but there are real people that are being affected by this economy. So we want to know more about our population, and to help us with that, how we've changed and what this means for our future. We've asked North Carolina's premier demographer, Rebecca Tippett, Director of Demography, this is a mouthful, of the UNC Population Center at Chapel Hill, Carolina Population Center, to help us. Rebecca, for the third year in a row, North Carolina grew by more than 100,000 people. Why are we growing so fast?
So the big reason that we're growing as quickly as we are is because more people are moving here than are moving away. As John and I were talking before the show, yes, people do move away from North Carolina, but we do get more people moving in.
Where are they coming from?
So we have a lot of swaps, kind of ins and outs with our near neighbors, particularly Virginia and South Carolina. But our biggest net importers are places like New York, New Jersey. Some of that is kind of a historic corridor where during the Great Migration, our residents were moving to those places, and now we're seeing the children and grandchildren of those migrants come south. From an international perspective, we've really seen immigration shift from Mexico to large inflows from China and India.
Interesting. Now, so I know with 10 million people, it's impossible to give me a picture, a specific picture. But as closely as you can, give us a demographic picture of North Carolina.
So right now, our total population is around 10.4 million. So we're projected to hit about 10.6 million by 2020. 16% of that population is 65 and older. And given the fact that, you know, the good thing about that is that you hit 65 and you continue on up that age pyramid, right? That's a good thing for most people. We should see that proportion continue to increase as the baby boom generation continues to age into that 65 plus category through 2030.
But millennials are growing fast.
Well, millennials, they've all been born, right? You know, so to some extent, they're large, but they're not quite as large of a generation as the baby boomers were.
Okay.
And to some extent, it's because the baby boom is just the largest generation to ever hit those older ages, while also being able to fully benefit from improvements in medical care and longevity.
So we're getting older.
Yeah, so 85 plus is the new category to watch, right? So
I'm hopeful of that. It's giving me great comfort.
We're getting older.
We're getting older, or nationally, we're getting less white.
Yes.
We're getting more brown and black. Is that the trend in North Carolina?
So the big thing in North Carolina, the fastest growing population right now is our Asian residents. Again, that's primarily because of immigration. The second fastest growing racial ethnic group is multiracial, because as you get a more diverse population, you have increasing intermarriage and interracial childbearing. How those individuals will identify as they get to be 18 plus, anybody's guess at this point. And then the third fastest growing group is the Hispanic or Latino population, and that's primarily because of childbearing, not because of continued immigration.
Interesting. So we understand that roughly 30% of our population has an advanced degree, either an associate degree or undergraduate.
Yeah.
So tell us about that, education-wise. Increasing, decreasing, what?
So the overall educational attainment level of the state is going up. We've seen high school graduation rates are steadily increasing, actually have surpassed the national rate overall. We have smaller gaps between our racial and ethnic groups in our state compared to the national average. So those are some good news stories. When we talk about post-secondary attainment, I like to focus on the 25 to 64-year-olds because that's really the major participants in the labor market. And that's about 43% with an associate degree or higher. Another 5% are estimated to have a post-secondary non-degree credential that has workplace value, and that's going up.
So you're estimating we're going to get up around 11 million people by the 2020 census?
10.6.
Okay. Does that mean we're going to get an additional our 14th congressional seat, you think?
Well, provided that the counts come out appropriately nationwide, we should expect to see a 14th seat. If anybody tells you we're going to get a 15th seat, disabuse them of that notion because that's very unlikely.
Yeah, well, that's going to make even more turmoil as we try to reapportion and redistrict. But in addition to our two experts on the economy and population, we're proud to have some of the best public policy minds in our state each week. Chris Fitzsimon and John Hood, two of our founding panelists and are on each week. I want to ask you to share with us your predictions for 2019. Chris?
Well, I think there's several things in the political and public policy world. I do think we'll see some news about Speaker Moore, the investigations into Speaker Moore's business practices, which I think will be a major story maybe midway later through the year. Of course, the big story dominating politics in North Carolina, there'll be two. One is the legislative session with a governor who now doesn't face a supermajority. So I think there's much more horse trading. I think the budget debate, the legislative session will be dramatically different in 2019 than it's been for the last several years because of that factor. And then 2020 has already started. because when the 2020 election, so a lot of the decisions made in the next 2 years by politicians, most people rightfully will be looking at what the policy implications are and then what are the political ramifications and reasons that these people are making these decisions.
The legislature changed the primary date to March.
Well, that's right.
So we're going to be actually having campaigns kicking off the latter part of this year in anticipation of the March primary, and filings should begin December?
That's correct.
Yeah. John, your predictions?
Well, I'll go off of that one for a second. Yes, we see the 2020 election cycle is sped up a little bit more. We'll see the jockeying for position in 2019, in particular for races like lieutenant governor, of course, the U.S. Senate challenge against Tom Tillis, assuming that he's running for re-election. These will be places where new faces, new Democrats, or in the lieutenant governor case, both sides.
Yeah, there are 5 or 6 candidates I've heard
already will be running, and we will
governor.
see those candidates actively campaigning throughout 2019 because the primary is earlier than it used to be. The other thing I want to say is I think that this year's legislative session will be capped off by, unfortunately, a lengthy standoff on the state budget. I think the Governor Cooper feels empowered. He's going to propose a budget the Republicans will not support because they'll have a big tax increase in it, and they'll have a big
and then
fight.
He'll veto it, and they can't override.
And then we'll see what happens.
And I think the override, another thing we didn't talk about yet is that I don't know what will happen, but there will be a report from the federal special prosecutor, I think and which will polarize. I mean, depends on what's in it, but it's sort of the bomb that's waiting to go off, which could affect not just federal elections, but the Republican Party in North Carolina internally, how they relate to Democrats. It's still the overriding issue in a lot of people's minds.
All right. So far as it goes, are we going to see a redistricting and impartial redistricting commission established this year?
I believe that redistricting reform will pass, yes.
All right, Speaker.
You mean go on the ballot, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that it will pass the legislature and go on the ballot sometime
House
in
Speaker
2020.
wants to have a $2 billion school bond referendum. You think that'll pass?
I think yes, I do think that'll be one of the few bipartisan areas. I think that they're going to argue about the details, but I think the concept they're all for it.
Are we going to put lots of ornaments on this Christmas tree because transportation needs to be water, sewer?
I hope not, because the fiscal capacity right now is not there.
Medicaid expansion. We're going to see that. There have been a lot of people predicting that it might happen this year.
I think there'll be a significant push for it. I'm still not sure that what Republicans might want to do is something that the Democrats will accept as Medicaid expansion.
I think there's a better than 50% chance that some version will pass. I may not like it, but I think some version will pass.
Yeah, Mike, the governor's saying that this is going to help our economy from the standpoint that we'll be going to get federal dollars to be paying for this, and it'll take some pressure off our hospitals.
Well, in the short run, that's true, but I think the concern's always been about the long run, whether the state will have to up its ante.
Yeah, and so far as it goes, any kind of special things you see? You talked about this population getting older here. Any tribute being paid to our older citizens in North Carolina, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, that's probably beyond my specific ability to predict.
You know, that is the first time and probably the most truthful answer. Can we save that tape, Will? In 20 years, that's probably the best thing we've ever had said. It's beyond my ability to be able to predict. Speaking of predictions, though, we do want to ask our panel to tell us something we don't know, the part of our show that so many of you tell us that you enjoy. John Hood, I'll start with you. Tell us something we don't know.
During the first 5 months of the fiscal year, North Carolina's state budget has experienced about $100 million higher revenues than was anticipated. That's not about a $300 million cash surplus for the first 5 months of the year. That's better than having a negative. People ought not to get too excited about it. These are pretty small numbers in the whole scheme of things. We're very close to predicted.
Well, and along those lines, we were talking about the legislature a few minutes ago. Are they going to be trying to beef back up that rainy day fund this year?
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, because of what we've had to pay out for.
Well, because whether it's 2019 or 2020, at least a mild recession is in the offing.
All right. Rebecca, tell us something we don't know.
So one of the big stories of the first part of the decade was that most of the population growth was heavily concentrated in our major employment centers, Mecklenburg, Wake, Durham, and the surrounding. And in the past year or so, we've seen that growth start to return to what we call a pre-recession growth pattern, where we're seeing the suburbs and the exurbs pick up that growth, very consistent with the story in terms of economic development going on in those areas.
What's the explanation for that?
A lot of it is that, lending has loosened a little bit, home building has returned, and in general, it goes along with the story of opportunity and
prices.
Mike, I got 1 minute left. Tell us something we don't know.
Opportunity zones, you're going to hear more about that in 2019. I participated in a conference here sponsored by the Federal Reserve. This is the new way of investing, causing people to invest in lower prosperity areas.
Chris, tell us something we don't know.
Quickly, in the Lieutenant Governor's race, John mentioned it. We already know Terry Van Dyne from Asheville is running for the Democratic nomination. Cal Cunningham, most likely. Two Republicans you might hear about, Mark Johnson and Senator Danny Britt.
Interesting. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, sign up for our free weekly email newsletter. Give your feedback and read my weekly column. Be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook and join us next week for more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
They're up before dawn and work late into the night. They believe in hard work, family, and doing the right thing. They stand up for their communities when others walk away. They're good people who just want a fair shake. They are farmers. At North Carolina Farm Bureau, we are proud to stand with our farmers.
Life's busy, but you're in control. As an electric cooperative member, you have access to lots of tools to help manage your home energy use and budget, so you can focus on what's most important.
From treating the newest member of your family to helping a loved one make end-of-life decisions, your family physician is with you every step, for every stage of life, for every member of your family. Despite a healthcare landscape fraught with potential landmines, family physicians across North Carolina are providing you a lifetime of committed, dependable medical care. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC TV network.